That was just lovely. Thank you, Alma. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 Yale School of Nursing Creative Writing Awards. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate our incredibly talented Yale School of Nursing students in this very special school tradition. For so many reasons, the Creative Writing Awards is a beloved event for our community. Especially after a year of turmoil, loss, and trauma, it is truly a form of healing to gather and honor the power of memorializing nursing stories. Our faculty, students, alumni, and preceptors across the specialties have cared for patients in the last year with compassion and skill, and our students continued their education against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nurses, as we know from the first report this last year on the state of the world's nursing, are the backbone of health systems and nearly 60% of the world's health workforce. As we heard at the Bellows lecture earlier this week, health systems could not have responded to COVID in any viable way without nursing, nor could the vaccination efforts have rolled out as they have, including here at Yale, where over 100 YSN students staff that work. As you've seen in the chapbook, many of the entries for this year's awards reflect the uncertainty, trepidation, bravery, innovation, and commitment of our students as they navigated the uncharted territory of this last year. After having to cancel almost all events just one spring ago, we are really happy to be together virtually tonight. We're especially thrilled to have the opportunity to hear from the groundbreaking writer, Linda Villarosa, who will give the keynote shortly. YSN students come from an astonishing array of backgrounds and life experiences, and this evening's exceptional program underscores exactly how talented, how empathetic our students are. Through their stories, we are reminded of the crucial role nursing plays in healing, and also reminded of why it is so important to record and memorialize the stories. I'm very proud to be part of this community and this event, the 18th time that it's been held. As many of you know, this signature occasion for our community would not have come into being without its creator and nurturer, Dr. Linda Honan, class of '89, MSN, PhD, CNS-BC, RN, ANEF, and FAAN. Professor of Nursing and educator at YSN since 1986. After 31 years of devoted teaching, touching scores of students over the decades, Linda will be retiring this year. This is a moment to acknowledge Linda's exceptional creativity, fierce dedication to her students, and blazing impact on nursing education. The Creative Writing Awards will continue on as a cherished tradition for our school because Linda birthed and grew it as she has. Indeed, Linda's passion for combining the science of nursing with Yale's tradition of the arts and humanities has become an integral part of the fabric of YSN itself. Many tributes will, of course, continue to come Linda's way, as well they should. On behalf of the YSN community, I'd like to take this particular opportunity to wish Linda all our best as she moves on to her next chapter. And we want to acknowledge her for gifting us this creative and powerful experience. Linda, you inspire, and we thank you. And now I'm honored to welcome Linda and turn the evening over to her.
Thank you, Anne. It's my honor to introduce Linda Villarosa, a legend and a luminary researching and reporting on race, inequality, and health. She is a twice former executive editor of Essence, the author of 3 books, including Body and Soul, The Black Woman's Guide to Physical Health and Emotional Well-Being. And she has produced award-winning reporting on racism and discrimination in the healthcare system for a range of different outlets. Linda is currently the director of City College of New York's journalism program and a contributing writer for New York Times Magazine. You likely read the landmark piece in the 1619 Project last September, digging into the quote, myths about physical racial differences used to justify slavery, such as pain tolerance and lung capacity that are still believed by some in medicine today. It was after reading that sobering and much needed piece that we immediately sought her as our keynote speaker. And then, well, COVID. How painfully prescient her perspective proved to be through the pandemic as racial inequities deepen. Her most recent contributions relate to the toll COVID-19 has taken on Black communities in America and the environmental justice movement in Philadelphia. She is currently writing her newest book, Under the Skin: Race, Inequality, and the Health of a Nation for Doubleday. She has been recognized by the American Medical Writers Association, the Arthur Ashe Institute, Lincoln University, the New York Association of Black Journalists, the National Women's Political Caucus, the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association, and the Callan Lord Community Health Center for giving voice to the stories and the lived experiences of Black women. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Linda Villarosa.
Thank you. I'm really loving that applause. I don't know where it's coming from, but I just want more of that. Well, thank you, Dean Kurth, for your leadership, Linda H., as we now have to call ourselves because we're Linda Squared. Congratulations on the retirement, and thank you. You're going to be really missed. And thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. And thank you to all out there who nurture creativity at the Yale School of Nursing. I'm deeply honored to be with so many talented, committed people, and also who share my own special sweet spot, which is the intersection of writing and medicine. I think it's interesting how often what we think of as what it takes to be a good nurse or a good midwife or a good healthcare provider is in opposition to creativity. As though medicine and science aren't creative pursuits, as though a wild mind can't also be a disciplined mind, as though a creative spirit also can't be attentive to detail, and as though numbers and words don't go together. But I believe the best of you, the best nurses, offer the radical gift of listening, just the way the best writers and journalists do. I believe that the deeper you listen, the better you write. I believe that the deeper you listen, the better you heal. I also think that both journalists and healthcare providers of all kinds have been told that emotions have no place in our work, and that at a minimum, they're an impediment to success, and at worst, they're dangerous and even deadly. As a young journalist, I was told these words: do not let yourself be emotional. Do not let your emotions take over your work. And we were told kind of to pull down an imaginary curtain and to put your head down and to do your job. And that's what I assume some of you may have been told. And I was thinking about this, and I remember the first real story I did reporting on HIV/AIDS, which it was so long ago that it didn't even have a name. We were just calling it GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. And I was a freelancer at Essence. I was not full-time. And the editor-in-chief called me and she said, would you please write about this really scary disease that's killing people? No one understands it. It's about the immune system. And I was surprised that someone of my level got that story, but I realized later that I got the story because several other people that were better writers than me turned it down because they were afraid. And I think fear is part of our work. Fear is something we sometimes embrace, but mostly have to overcome. I was so naive, I didn't even know to be afraid. So I was sent for Essence magazine by the Gay Men's Health Crisis to the Bronx to interview a woman. That's all I knew. And I'm like, I don't understand why the Gay Men's Health Crisis is the one sending me to the Bronx to interview a woman. But by the time I got there to her house, and she had a baby on her lap. And the baby was super cute, was like a year and a half, and she was really ill. So she was telling me this story of how she contracted this bizarre disease. She thought from a guy she used to go with who used drugs. And she was telling me the story, and I saw her getting weaker and weaker. So I stopped pulling that curtain down, and I pulled the baby onto my lap and just really listened to her. And then the baby smiled up at me with no teeth in the mouth, and her mouth was completely white. And I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but I've got this baby on my lap. I've got to pay attention to this woman who is kind and brave enough to tell me her story just to help people. So we finished the story, and I handed the baby back. And I remember getting on the subway to go back home to Brooklyn, where I live. And I thought, let me pull down that curtain, because I just didn't want to think about the woman and how terrible and weak she seemed. The baby seemed something wrong with her. I later understood that the baby had thrush, a yeast disease, a yeast infection of the mouth, which is common in people with HIV. And I wrote that story with my head down, with that curtain pulled. The only time I had lifted it was when I had the kind of human feeling to hold the baby. I wrote the story. I filed the story. It closed. It was finished. I could let the curtain go. And by the time the story ran, the mother and the baby had died. So part of me thinks, well, maybe I was able to write that story because I pulled down that curtain away from my emotions, that line between my emotions and, what I was doing. But I looked at that story. It was in 1987. I started it in 86. It ran in 87. It's not great. Okay. It's not my usual level. I was very young. I was just trying to, cope and sort of keep everything together and keep the emotions out and just do my job. Now I look back and I think I could have done better if I had opened my heart. So now, 30 years later, I'm still writing about HIV/AIDS, a disease that is supposed to be a plague that should have ended, that in many cases people think has ended. And I got assigned a story, and it started with a number. So it started with, in 2016, I read that if no trends changed, half of all Black, gay, and bisexual men and transgender women would be living with HIV/AIDS, even though we pretty much know how to prevent it. And ground zero for this epidemic was in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. That is where my family is originally from. So I thought, why is HIV/AIDS still a thing? Why is it in Mississippi? And why is it in Jackson, which is best known for the book and the movie The Help, or jazz, or the blues and barbecue? So I had emotion around this number. I felt angry and confused. So I started interviewing people, and I was told by the experts to a person, while I got very, scientific public health people, that the high rates of HIV infection among Black, gay, and bisexual men in the South was clear. It was because they were in the South, they were largely uneducated and didn't know how to protect themselves. They were all poor. They lacked access to health care, including the antiviral medication that would save their lives. But writing about health and medicine always, this, means writing about people. So that confusing and maddening number took me to my brother's keeper in Jackson, Mississippi, and took me to this man who has the biggest heart I've really ever met, Mr. Cedric Sturdivant, who was a patient navigator at this clinic and organization called My Brother's Keeper. Note the name, My Brother's Keeper, because a lot of the organizations have names like that, as though we're always having to save ourselves, that we're our brother's keeper because no one else will keep us. So I already thought about that. I thought, this organization. Mr. Cedric is from the Delta, which is actually the poorest, most left behind place in the poorest, most left behind state in the country. I met this man with a big heart. He took me and introduced me to all the Black, gay, and bisexual men and transgender women who were dealing with this crisis, who were the faces, the people, the humanity behind these numbers. And I did not go in with a curtain drawn. I went in with a heart open. And that is why I feel like I got to understand that what I was told about that epidemic that is continuing was wrong. That this is not what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi, among Black, gay, and bisexual men and HIV in the South, the high death rates, the high infection rates in a small city like this, a small southern city, is not because of a lack of education. Many of the men that I interviewed were college educated. One of them had just got infected with HIV while I was there. He got his diagnosis. So many of them had insurance, or they had access to healthcare. They had jobs. That wasn't what they lacked. What they lacked was they felt thrown away. They felt ignored. They felt erased. That's what they told me when I opened my heart and asked them. And I spent time with them. This is different from only needing access to treatment and testing and prevention and care in the traditional sense. They told me they felt unseen. And what I heard is they felt unloved. That calls for a different solution. It calls for a different even kind of reporting. If what they needed more than anything else was love, to be held, to be supported, that is beyond science. That is underneath the numbers. And I only understood that because I listened with my heart. What I see in the work of this year's winners of the Yale School of Nursing Creative Writing Awards is so much big, thick heart. Camila, the way you described COVID as an illness that takes your breath away and sometimes never gives it back, or that you can't see the virus. It may be stuck in your hair, infecting your clothes, lingering in the single goodnight kiss, in the hug you give as you get home from a shift. That is writing at its best. It's simple, it's masterful, it's full of big, fat heart. Thank you for that. Max, thank you for describing the relief of a foot rub as one of the last delights to stay after your body has finally been forgotten in pain and its own devouring cells. That is stunning and bittersweet. Tim, your nursing home monologue embodies what I began with when I described the power of loving observation and listening with the heart, in order to allow people to be seen and heard, which is the gift you have given the nursing home patients that you care for and you write about. Thank you and congratulations to each of you. Now more than ever, the work that you do, all of you, do as healers and storytellers, and that intersection matters. We're bearing witness to a time like no other, and it's up to us to document what we see, what we hear, and yes, what we feel during this pandemic as healthcare providers, writers, and human beings. And that includes family members, friends, and lovers. Your journals, your stories, your poetry is documenting the work of healthcare providers as you strive and survive and sometimes thrive. You are our modern day war correspondents. And part of this work must be revolutionary truth-telling, being able to stand up and speak out against inequality and injustice, both in our medical system and in our society. These are the gifts we give each other, we give the world, and we give ourselves. Thank you, thank you, thank you for allowing me this space to speak, listen, and learn.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you to our guests for taking time out of your busy lives to support the Creative Writing Award. What originated as an assignment where students were asked to journal about the process of becoming a nurse or living the life of a nurse culminated in this event. We write to learn what and how we think, to unearth lessons, to preserve moments, to discern both the complexity of our experiences and the systemic factors that are associated with them. That's why we write. But to move them beyond the personal to the public offers opportunities to see, really see our profession in a tangible and an accessible way. And tonight, we are celebrating 18 years of Yale nurses writing nursing. We received nearly 50 submissions for tonight's award, And with a great deal of difficulty, the original submissions were narrowed by Nina Adams, Dr. Deborah Foss, Betsy Groff, Dr. Lawrence Gutterman, Katie Pellico, Mary Pearson, and Shel Swanson. The final submissions were whisked away to our 4 distinguished judges: Echo Heron, critical care nurse and New York Times bestselling author of 9 books; Ann Fadiman, award-winning author, essayist, editor, and teacher; Anna Quinlan, Pulitzer Prize-winning author; and Lee Woodruff, author of 3 best-selling books. The top writers for 2021 who are in the audience today are Sanjay Prasad, Kendall Coates, Marina Rosenberg, Nicole Kunle, Kendall Tamler, Libby Grant, Kay Green, Kiera Jackson, Ashley Evans, Shaliu Wang, Kathleen Lessard, Stacy Frizzell, Jordan Quinton, Jill Langan, Kylie Martin Horlacher, Leoncia Gillespie, Helen Day, and Sarah Ann Lovell. Please congratulate our honorable mention students. You will soon be able to read those students who all received honorable mentions on the Yale School of Nursing Creative Writing Award website shortly, as well as the 3 winners tonight for 2021. The winners will receive a citation and a check for $1,000 each, and of course, the honor of reading before this distinguished group. Before I introduce you to the students, I would like to acknowledge that the Creative Writing Award would not have happened for the past 18 years without your support and the generosity of our sponsors who have steadfastly sustained this endeavor. Thank you to Leslie Mills of Griswold Special Care for her generosity in creating an endowed fund to support this award in perpetuity, and for whom this award citation is named. Beth Beckman, Senior Nursing Executive for Yale New Haven Health Systems, and Ina Williams, Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer for Yale New Haven Hospital. Judy Krause, former Dean of YSN, former head of Silliman College, an extraordinary YSN alum. Kimberly Goff Cruz, Office of the Secretary and Vice President for Student Life at Yale University. Cassie and John Picard. Cassie is a YSN alum, a former associate dean at YSN, and John is a noted architect. John H. Driscoll Jr. and the Webster Private Bank. Walter Kluwer's Nursing Education Book Company. Linda Schwartz, YSN alum, former Assistant Secretary for Veterans Affairs for Policy and Planning under President Obama. Edward Cleary, and the Gustafson family. Elaine is a former YSN alum and former colleague as a faculty member. Thank you all. And finally, an event like tonight equates to increased workload for countless people that is completely unrelated to their job description. From Neil Green, who photographed our winners for years. Neve Emerson, who edited all documents and aided in securing sponsorships. Charlene Paradis, who manned countless online registration systems and numerous tip lists. Tracy Chitsey, also known as my right hand, who edits every document, brainstorms all ideas, serves as a sounding board and a livery service for the chapbook delivery. Lauren Langford and Rochelle Goodwin, who created our invitation. They procure press, they create and maintain the webpage, and finally our administrative team of Nancy DiMatteo, Jeanette C. Prats, Christine Zenzurski, Jasmine Ware, Colleen Colbert, and Lori Raziel, who tallied, returned calls, deposited checks, looked up home addresses, orchestrated, printed, helped budget, and managed to make the Creative Writing Award a success for nearly 2 decades. Thank you all. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to the top 3 writers at Yale School of Nursing. Our first reader will be Camila Soto Espinoza. She is a second-year certified nurse midwifery, women's health nurse practitioner student. She was born and raised in Chile, where she discovered her love for midwifery at a very early age. In 2015, she graduated as a certified midwife from the University of Concepcion and worked in multiple public hospitals across the country. It was through the stories of her patients that she was inspired to understand the connection between culture and medicine. She moved from Chile to the United States in 2018 to start her career at Yale. Camila has used her voice and her writing skills to share her experiences as an FGLI, first generation low income student, an immigrant, an advocate for diversity, inclusion, and change. She became a registered nurse in 2019, a Yale Institute of Global Health fellow at UNICEF in 2020, and she served as a student representative and co-chair for YSN's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council for 2 years. She has spent the COVID era working as an RN to keep the Yale community safe and on research to understand the immune response caused by COVID. She is currently completing her integration at Massachusetts General Hospital and is expected to graduate in May of 2021 as a midwife and a women's health nurse practitioner with a concentration in global health. Please welcome Camila.
Thank you. My piece is called Monotony. In the middle of a pandemic, my mother wears a mask as she cleans rooms in a hotel that shouldn't be full, yet somehow is fully booked. Tourists are enjoying vacations their entitlement has convinced them they deserve because quarantine is just so boring. In the middle of a pandemic, my father puts on a mask and gets on a bus that holds more people than seats. He has been asked to show up to a mine in the middle of the desert to fix this machine that is no longer working. The company is losing money and their patience is very short. In the middle of a pandemic, my sister wears the masks and answers the relentless questions of the customers that walk around the store. Does this come in a different color? Does this come in a different size? I'm just looking, thank you. This tiny store pays the bills and the food of 3 different families. In the middle of a pandemic, I wake up and get ready for work. I've lost that sense of fear of knowing that there is something lingering in the air that might just kill me. Long gone are the days where I was terrified of an illness that takes your breath away and sometimes never gives it back. Working is neither an option nor a choice for any of us. My family and their immigrant daughter have bills to pay and mouths to feed. What if you get sick? My mother stresses as she begs me for something no one can afford, to stay home. I lost the 5 jobs that kept me afloat once the pandemic hit, and I need all the ones I found because the virus is spreading. I have a duty to serve, and I need to make money because bills don't pay themselves and debt is growing. We have had the talk, the ultimate fear shared by everyone who loves someone who wears a pair of scrubs or has been labeled essential. She knows I made arrangements right at the beginning of the pandemic. I have assigned a person that will take care of my remains and send them back home. As for them, I'm the person that will take care of their remains if it ever comes to that. That's what my savings are for now, to pay for death. I walk to work. I wear a mask I carefully chose to brighten the dystopian nature of our reality. On my way to work, I listen to the news about the people that don't believe in this illness, and I listen to the news about the people that die of it. I get updates from my relatives and friends back in my home country. No hospital beds, so many are sick. I reach for my coffee mug to take a sip, and I almost feel I'm doing something illegal. I look around me as I quickly lower my mask and take a big gulp. Then I put it back up. I work. I watch adults and children and babies get tested for an illness that makes you drown from the inside out. My protective equipment makes me sweat every last drop of water until I'm dry on the inside and drenched on the outside. Parking lots were not made for this, yet here we are, unable to eat or drink, shoving swabs down holes I had forgotten we had, but gotten so incredibly familiar with now. Adults barely tolerate it. Kids look at you like you're torturing them. Babies have to be restrained by their parents. They cry so hard my ears are ringing by the end of it. I'm done with this shift. I walk back home and get naked right at the door. I then spray the door with my very last bottle of disinfectant. I'm so incredibly grateful my family is not here with me. I jump out the shower, I change. I look at myself in the mirror and notice the red marks in the bridge of my nose that seem to be permanent by now. I wonder if it leaves a scar. I get ready for my second job. I walk, I get updates on the worsening symptoms of my relatives and friends back in my home country. Still no hospital beds, even more people are sick. I don't drink coffee this time. I keep my mask in place and walk in silence as my upper lip is drenched in sweat and a lingering headache reminds me I need water and food, not more coffee. I work. I watch healthcare workers arriving defeated. They give me their arm and other sorrows. I get a single vial of blood from one of their veins, and I'm surprised I'm getting something other than air. They look hollow. They look empty. They make me wonder how much pain and death we can witness without falling apart. And I'm certain some are close to figuring it out. I wonder if the next pandemic will be PTSD and suicide. It's a horrible way to die, they tell me, and we might just die the same way. We might. I respond, wondering if my respirator fits me well as my protective goggles and shield fog with condensation. We share a moment of silence, then we part ways. Sweat drips down my back, covers my upper lip, the skin under my eyes, my hairline. I work in 4-hour intervals with 15-minute breaks. I drink water and later regret it because that means I'll have to pee. PPE is a commodity and you can't waste it like that. I take more samples, see more hollow faces. I hear the story of a man who died in the same bed where his wife had died a week prior. My best friend back home texts me. She is also sick. I keep working. The next person tells me they recently sent their daughter and partner away to live with their parents so they could be safe from the invisible dangers they carry home. You can't see it. It might be stuck in your hair, infecting your clothes, lingering the single goodnight kiss and the hug you give them as you get home from a shift. I keep working. The next person tells me they are caring for their own people, doctors and NPs and PAs and nurses that work floors they later populate as patients. I keep working. My uncle is sick and rushed to the ER. My grandma's O2 saturation is getting lower by the hour. I keep working. Free food. I go home. I repeat my little ritual. I get undressed by the door and put my clothes in a bucket. I'm almost out of disinfectant and there's no way to find more. My best friend might get rushed to the ER if she continues to deteriorate. I shower. My feet throb and so does my head. Dehydration is getting the best of me. I drink some water. I make some snacks that I eat while I keep working. My third job needs my attention. I read about the incompetence of government officials and the people that died because of it. I write reports I'll soon use in meetings, and then it's time for bed. I don't usually go to bed. I fall into bed. I pass out in my bed. More than sleeping, it feels like I'm being turned off. Awake one moment and completely gone the next. I'm so exhausted, so drained, so incredibly numb that falling asleep is a matter of closing my eyes. Not this night though. Tonight I cry. I don't know why I'm crying, what I'm crying about. I just do. I sob uncontrollably for however long it takes me to set my alarms to get up tomorrow and do all of this all over again. The remains of lingering fear, the rage of incompetence and apathy, the hopelessness that this will never end settle like sediments when I'm not in motion. My throat hurts, my head hurts, and I lay awake counting inhalations, wondering what it would be like to have lungs full of liquid, to be surrounded by air yet deprived of it. Does it feel like breathing in a void or underwater? Does it feel like a weight in your chest or like the world is suddenly devoid of oxygen? My eyes close, my alarm goes off. Somehow 5 hours of sleep felt like a second, a blink, a brief instant between two heartbeats, two breaths, two sobs. My uncle is in the ICU. My grandma made it through the night. I get up feeling more tired than yesterday, ready to do the exact same thing I've been doing for what feels like an eternity. There is such a monotony in a pandemic, such a rhythm in the sounds the world makes as it falls apart. Maybe it's one endless day or so many days rushing in at the speed of light that you can't pinpoint where one end and the other begins. It feels like the pandemic started yesterday and somehow also 10 years ago. And we are still in the middle of it. And in the middle of a pandemic where I get ready for work. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Before I introduce the next student, I would like to acknowledge that Camila is the first student in 18 years to win the Creative Writing Award each year she has been at Yale. Thus, she will go down in YSN history as being the first student with a trifecta in the Creative Writing Award. Congratulations and to Camila. Our second reader will be Maxwell Shaw Jones. Maxwell is an FNP student in his Gepin year. In 2018, he graduated from Middlebury College with a degree in English. In the few years following school, he alternately traveled and worked a wide range of jobs. After trying out being an island caretaker, an indoor rowing tank fabricator, and a museum security guard, he eventually realized that he wanted to become a nurse. Maxwell is unsure what type of nursing he wants to ultimately practice, but he's interested in primary care, and he will be co-facilitating the student-run Fall 2021 U.S. Health Justice Elective. Maxwell?
Thank you, Linda. And thank you, Camila, too, for that. This is a poem that is about 1.5 pages long, 1 page long if it's single space, so I won't take more than 3 minutes of your time. Yeah, and it's called His Feet. Near the end, Molly Flannery would come to the house where he was dying, and she would massage his feet. His feet, like mine, were not particularly attractive. They bunion bulged and they gnarled at the toes, but were still feet made well for massaging. And there was a thing in Molly Flannery which knew the truth, that one of the last delights to stay after your body finally has been forgotten in pain and its own devouring by cells is a foot rub. That remained even after his appetite went, after the muscles faded off of his long arms and legs, when he left the bed less and less until finally never. It was around then that Molly Flannery began to come, bringing cocktails for my mother, lasagna for my brother and me, her black hair billowing straight behind her from the car and up to his bed where she'd set to working on his feet immediately. Here was my father laid out dying. And here were her hands that held and held as he sighed in that quiet, fading relief. I've never stopped loving Molly Flannery for this. This love lives in me like a tiny world, a snow globe, where his pain and my grief becalm at the genius of her hand's sudden tenderness. And 2 days ago, In the hospital, after a 12-hour shift with my patient whose brain and lungs crawled with that same teeming cellular rage my father knew, after a day of washing him moaning and hunting for words the cancer had long ago eaten, him looking me in the eyes with his mouth widely open, always open, my shift was suddenly over. I had to go home. I understood this man would be dead soon. On my way out, I went to the room and I took his feet in my hands and I held them. I squeezed them, first the left, then the right, and told this man goodbye. I would be leaving now and would not come back in time.
Thank you, Maxwell. Our third reader tonight will be Tim McGehee. Tim is a first-year adult geriatric primary care nurse practitioner student from Milford, Connecticut. After briefly training to sail in the Merchant Marines, he enlisted in the United States Coast Guard, drawn to its mission of homeland security and safety of life at sea. From the North Atlantic to the Caribbean, he stood watch over his cutter's propulsion plant as a machinery technician. There, he built the skills of maintaining and troubleshooting and repairing machinery. In a twist of fate, Tim was struck by the similarities between troubleshooting machinery and diagnosing disease. After 4 years, he separated from the Coast Guard, taking his chances on college and a career in healthcare. Upon graduating from the University of Connecticut with honors, he worked as a nursing home certified nursing assistant. There, he developed an appreciation for the power of building strong relationships with patients, the holistic nursing model of care, and the medical needs of older adults. He has continued to work in long-term care setting as a registered nurse. Outside of YSN, Tim is married with 2 young boys, and he intends to work in primary care as a nurse practitioner for the Department of Veteran Affairs. Tim?
Thank you, Linda. This is Pain You Say, a nursing home monologue. Pain You Say. You asked me if the resident in 212 has complained of pain this evening. Well, let's see now. I arrived this afternoon at 3 o'clock. First thing I did was check on 201. The nurse on the morning shift said the resident was running a low-grade fever. Took it again and it looks just fine to me now. The resident in 202 had a blood sugar that was way up there and was very concerned. When I went back in to give insulin, I found her eating a whole bag of chips. I guess she can't be too concerned. Keep a close eye on 203. He kept getting out of his chair and without his walker. I'll tell you, that chair alarm was going off my whole shift. I could hardly hear the phone ring, which reminds me, 204's daughter, Donna, called again. She instructed me not to give out medical information to the other daughter, Rhonda. I can't say I'm guilty, but it sure is easy to get their names mixed up. The resident in 205 is alert but confused. She thinks we're dating and asked if there was another woman. I told her I was married. She said we must be too young for the responsibility of a relationship. Now, the gentleman in 206 was being inappropriate with the aides again. I sat him down. I told him to cut it out, but he acted like he couldn't hear me. I guess his hearing loss comes and goes. The woman in 207 asked for a glass of wine with her supper. Sure enough, it's in her PRN orders. She finished it right there in front of me and asked for another right away. You know the married couple in 208 and 209, don't you? 75th anniversary this year. Well, he wouldn't leave her alone before dinner, so she kicked him out, directed me not to let him back in until after lunch tomorrow. The resident in 210 had her shower today, but refused to let me do a skin assessment after. She could not believe I was a male nurse. Told me we would be the, quote, talk of the town. When entering 211, I was told to take cover. The gentleman there thinks there's a battle going on outside his room, and even pretended to throw a grenade in the bathroom before cleaning his dentures. I think he needs to change the military channel. Before bed, the resident in 212 refused her senna. She said, I don't need those brown pills, and threw them right in the garbage. Still no bowel movement though, and due for milk and magnesia if nothing by morning. And just before I walked out the room, you know what she said? Come back with something for this pain.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you to all the writers. Let's give them all an applaud, our 3 winners. I used to say that nurses were secret keepers. We kept our experience of the most intense, intimate moments in people's lives cloaked to all but other nurses. But tonight you were privileged to hear 3 remarkable nurse writers disclose their stories. Writ large, the function of narrative or story is to connect to the reader. The connection is joined not so much with the intellect of the reader, but to the sense of, if not shared, at least appreciated lived experience. Story gives insight into the world of nursing and the gifts that our students give to the world. And tonight was about giving voice to them. We need to challenge ourselves to continue to write about our work. Tonight, you were witness to the impact of COVID in 2 countries, the distress, the dreariness, and the depletion of one nurse. Yet each day she rose. You were reminded of the alchemy of touch when there is no cure, and the power of humor to find joy in a workplace. And the time has now come for me to close out the evening and my career at YSN. Like Mary Poppins, the wind has changed, the mist is rolling in, and it's time for me to leave, even if it is hard. I have been honored to teach now thousands of Geppins for over 3 decades, and I have loved almost every minute of it. I thank you again to all the reviewers, the judges, the staff, the donors, the patrons, and the sponsors who opened up their hearts and their pocketbooks to make this event a reality. And my final thank you goes to all of the students over the years who have enchanted us, who have informed us, and have exclaimed that nursing does indeed matter. Good night and be well. Thank you again.